Today I will show you who actually shouldn't be moving to Bulgaria, why so many people overpay for their housing here, the truth about healthcare system, and whether after everything that we've experienced, do we actually regret moving here. This is the part most people don't really talk about, but if you are seriously considering to move here, you need to hear it. I also created a full relocation guide, and I'm running a Q&A chat where I am answering your questions myself. Check out the links in the description. One of the first things that stood out to us when we moved to Bulgaria is that how easy it was to rent an apartment. At least that was our first impression, which is not always true, but let me tell you more. What makes it so easy is that here it's a renter's market, which means there are many offers for any kind of budget, and you can move in almost within days. You don't need to prove that you have income, you don't need to provide a work contract, you don't need to go for an interview with a landlord to see if they like you or not. You don't need to bid higher than what's on the advertisement. You can even negotiate to actually get a lower rent. And all of that is because there is no other 20, 30, 50 people who are fighting to rent the same apartment, like these days in the UK or Germany or the Netherlands. Another huge bonus is that there are many offers with furnished apartments, because as expats we never know if we're gonna stay longer than a year. Even a year sometimes can be tough. So you don't want to spend thousands of euros furnishing that apartment. If you haven't been to the Netherlands, there many apartments can be rented not just without furnishings, they can be rented without floors. It's a long-standing tradition, let's not go into it here. But for example, in Germany, I've heard from friends, there are also minimal furnishing and sometimes not even a kitchen. So imagine how much you would need to spend to move in and start living there. So when I compare situation in Sofia to that, here it's basically heaven. But every fairy tale has dark spots in it that do require some attention. The first downside with rentals is, of course, in every country, you're a foreigner, you are ripe for the taking. That's how the agents see you. They specifically sometimes work with foreigners because they know they can upsell. So the apartment that's actually worth, for example, 600 to 700 euros a month, and that can be a 2-bedroom here in Sofia, you will get offers for 1100. Or you might be in a situation where they will show you a couple of really expensive apartments, and then the third one will be only 1000, and you will think, oh, that's a great deal, I take it. And in reality, that apartment can go for about 600. Of course, it depends if you have the time to negotiate, if you have time to look, if you have someone you can ask. Many expats in their first year, they end up overpaying for their apartment. But I would say that this unfair pricing is not the biggest issue. The biggest problem could be is if you rent the apartment, pay the deposit, and the landlord doesn't mention that this apartment would not be good for your residency application. And then you might not just lose quite some time on it, but also you might lose your deposit if the agent or landlord just refuses to give it back. I'm giving some tips on rentals in the guide, as well as helping members of the Q&A chat. And the third biggest downside of rentals in Sofia is that in the city there are many old Soviet block buildings. They are grey, they are not pretty at all. They served an important purpose. They gave homes to so many Bulgarians in the tough times. And actually here in Bulgaria, for people, one of the biggest priorities is to get your own apartment. It might not be the best, but it has to be yours. People are seen as unsuccessful if they are just renting their whole life. But the good news is that there are choices. There are new neighborhoods where new constructions are being built, and even in older neighborhoods there are many newer constructions. So if you really don't want the Soviet block building, although they have their positive sides, apart from how they look, they inside can be really good and renovated. But if you really don't want it, there are also neighborhoods where are no Soviet blocks at all. And because there are so many new constructions, there are also many offers for rentals. So yeah, having a choice is definitely a very positive side of rentals in Bulgaria. And if you're looking to settle long term and to buy, prices for apartments in Bulgaria are still relatively affordable. They are rising like everywhere in the world, but I would say in Sofia for a small apartment you should start budgeting not lower than 100,000 euros. And for example, in a smaller town, in Bansko, it's a popular ski resort about 2-hour drive from Sofia, from the capital. There we recently saw offers starting from 35,000 for a studio. Of course, that's just a starting price. A 2-bedroom is already closer to 100 in a prime location. So definitely there are good possibilities to not beat around the bush. This is the biggest reason people look into Bulgaria in the first place. Yes, it is 100% true. The personal and the corporate tax are only 10%. But there are certain things, the details, that can basically make it or break it for you. There is more to it than just the 10% number. If you're freelancing or running your own international business, then Bulgaria can be very tax efficient for you, especially if your monthly income crosses around 4,000 euro, more or less. That's when you will be really saving compared to countries like Spain, Germany, Netherlands. In those countries, the more you earn, the higher your tax rate. And here it always stays flat 10%. Another pro of taxes in Bulgaria is that social security's payment have a cap. No matter how much you earn, it can be 4,000 euro, it can be 40,000 euro a month, you will never be paying more than around 500 euro a month in social securities. Of course, that number is increasing year by year, but not dramatically. So for example, for people earning on a lower end, about 1,000, they can take up 30% of your income or something like that. But if you are earning more, 4, 5, 6,000 euro a month, then it's only 500 euro and not more. And then with social securities included, your effective tax rate can be 18–19%. Another pro is that if you're a freelancer, you also have 25% deductibles, which means 25% of your income is automatically deducted and you pay taxes only on the 75%. And there is no need to collect receipts or prove your expenses in any way. Those 25% are unconditional. Of course, depending on what's your business setup, you might be paying slightly more, slightly less. Your percentage will be different, but that can be an hour-long conversation to cover all the details. But in my relocation guide, I give you the basic overview of how taxation works in Bulgaria, so you can make rough estimations for your case. The link is in the description. And of course, the downside of taxes is if your income is below 2,000 euro. I would not recommend Bulgaria because the social securities and the tax, together with rent, they will be eating up most of your income. And big part of my audience actually want to retire in Bulgaria, so you will not be working, but you're still receiving pensions or social security payments. And the good news, in Bulgaria, they are not taxed. And Bulgaria has double taxation treaties with US, with Canada, with UK, and many other countries. One of the things I was praising in my other videos about Bulgaria is the healthcare. It's easy to book a doctor and they're speaking English, and you can see a specialist within a week. You don't need to wait for months. The hospitals and medical centers are modern and well equipped, but there is always a but. And people in the comments, locals mostly, let me know that it's not as good as I paint it out to be, that public healthcare can be slow and the hospitals can be outdated. Basically everything opposite of what I was saying. But the thing is, I was describing my actual experiences, so I did not make all that up. So why is my experience is so different? The reason is simple. I was using the private healthcare. With public healthcare in Bulgaria, it is basically the same as in other countries in Europe. Yes, you might have to wait for an appointment for weeks. Yes, the doctor might not be prescribing you tests that you want him to prescribe to you. Yes, some of the facilities can be outdated. And unfortunately, I'm talking about it not from my own experience, but from experience of people in the comments. But I have no reason to think that they are lying, because it is the same in every country. However, what makes Bulgaria different is that private healthcare is much more accessible and affordable than in Western Europe. In some of the countries in Western Europe, you can't even use the private healthcare. You are stuck with public. And if you want something done that your doctor doesn't want to prescribe to you, then you have to travel to, I don't know, Poland or Bulgaria or just another country where it's possible. Here, the major benefit of local private healthcare that I see is that if you have a certain concern about your health, maybe it's not anything big, but it worries you, you can just go online, sign up to see a doctor within the same week, and you can check if the doctor will be speaking English, you can check what kind of hospital it is, you can even make a note and describe your symptoms so the doctor is prepared. And then what you need is 50 to 100 euros in your pocket to pay for that visit. And actually about 50 to 70% of doctors that I've been to, they also accept public healthcare patients. But sometimes their schedule can be quite full and I would have needed to wait for a month, for example. So in the end, even with public healthcare, it would be the same doctor, just a bit more waiting time. So I wouldn't say that you cannot depend on public healthcare here at all. It's just you have a choice here, and the private healthcare is actually affordable. And one thing crucial to know is that not everyone is eligible for the public healthcare. It's a benefit if you're relatively healthy, because that would mean you will also not be paying contributions towards that. However, if you have a serious condition that you know about that requires a lot of ongoing care and many tests, then your expenses might be piling up. If I have a client with a case like that, during one-on-one consultations, we look at the global coverage plans. So everyone is talking about how tricky it can be to submit your documents for residency and to deal with the migration office. But there is another layer of fun that starts after you get your ID card. It begins with your simple desire to get yourself a credit card at a local bank. Turns out most of Bulgarian banks these days, they are hesitant to open accounts for foreigners, especially if you're a remote worker or a business owner. They want some sort of attachment to Bulgaria. They want you to prove that you're here for good. So they are much more likely to open an account for someone who has a work contract. And again, the process is very bureaucratic. You might be presented with a million forms, then you submit them, then they call you, you don't have something else. What else? Oh, it's just some form. What kind of form? We don't know. Bye. That was a bit of my experience. Yeah, I was asked to give them the form that the manager didn't know what the form is. Luckily, I did figure it out. It took a bit of time. But I would not recommend going through this to anyone else, to be honest. The good news is that most likely you do not need an account with a local bank. Especially if you have EU citizenship. Starting January 2026, Bulgaria is fully switching to Euro, so you can just use your Euro card here. And if you are a non-EU citizen, you can open an online account with one of the fintech solutions. There are several of them, and they can open you an account just with the scan of your ID card, and that account you can use here everywhere. You can just pay with your phone or even order a physical card. One of the things about Sofia that we loved here after relocating from Southeast Asia is how walkable the city center is. Finally, we had the sidewalks that are not taken by the bikes and shops, and we didn't have to, watch our back all the time because the bikes are coming from everywhere and honking all the time. So this is quite common actually for Europe, to have the city center very walkable. And another great thing about Sofia is how great the public transport is. There is efficient metro that is clean, fast, it goes on a schedule. Basically, there is a train every 5 minutes or so. There is even a direct line from the airport. And the taxis are also reliable and affordable. I usually spend maybe 5 to 10 euros on a ride. But that's Sofia, of course, the capital of Bulgaria. Once you go outside, the situation changes. There is no metro in other even bigger cities. There are buses, but that's about it. And in smaller towns like Bansko, for example, there is no public transport at all. And in the summertime, of course, you can get away by just biking, but in the winter, I would say you definitely need a car. If you're just a tourist there, basically you stay close to the city center, you can just walk everywhere. It's also very walkable. But if you're a resident, you might be living in further away locations in the city, and to even do your grocery shopping in a big supermarket, you will need some sort of transportation. I did have a thought of checking out of intercity buses and trains, but even locals told me that trains are not the best. So far in this last year, we did several trips to different cities, and I told you about all of them in another video, and each time we chose to rent a car. Another moment of truth is the food and restaurant scene here in Bulgaria. During this year we did find some places and chain restaurants that we really love, and sometimes in my chat group I do share new discoveries. But overall the restaurant scene here is still developing, and trying out a new place can be a hit or miss. Personally, what I see is that many mid-range restaurants offer foods that are not the healthiest. They are cooked in a lot of oil, a lot of salt is used. That might be my personal preference. If I compare Sofia with cities like Amsterdam or Bangkok, of course it's nowhere near. You will not find such variety and so many options. But the positive side of that, for me personally, is that we do not become so reliant on deliveries. For example, in Southeast Asia, there it's really easy to slip into just ordering every single meal. And not all the options are that healthy if you think of it. Again, they have oil, they have sugar in them. So in the end, it's not so healthy to live like that. So we started cooking at home even more here, and we can really pay attention to the ingredients. And actually my clients from the US and Canada, they do praise the quality of local produce, and there are big supermarkets where you can find any ingredient that you want to cook any meal that you want. When you first arrive in Bulgaria, you might notice that life here feels just a bit more chaotic. There is no such strict order as you might find in Germany or the Netherlands. However, I would say that it's not as chaotic as in Southeast Asia. It is somewhere in the middle. You might notice that people are smoking in cafes on the terraces. You might notice that sidewalks are not fully flat everywhere. There are areas of the city that are really good, and then there are neighborhoods that feel more run down. For me personally, I must say that this kind of living makes me more relaxed actually, because in countries where social rules are more strict, I sometimes feel like I have to tiptoe. I have to be really careful and not break some unspoken rule because I didn't know it. And then people would be looking at me strangely or judging me quietly. You know that kind of feeling? I don't even know how to explain it perfectly, but if you understand me, let me know in the comments. but life here somehow feels more relaxed in that sense. There is no complete chaos or anarchy, of course, and the drivers let you go on the road when you're crossing, which doesn't happen much in Istanbul, for example. People are courteous. So overall, people are polite. There are societal rules. Nobody is throwing trash everywhere all the time, how it can happen sometimes in Southeast Asia. But there is still just a bit less order than in the Northern Europe, just enough to feel more relaxed and more at ease. So if that's the feeling that you're looking for yourself, I would say that you should give Bulgaria a chance. So one of the best parts about Bulgaria, I would say, is that it's actually not for everyone. It stays quite niche. For the right person, it works great here, and for others it doesn't work at all. In fact, during one-on-one relocation consultations, in 50% of the cases, I encourage my clients to look elsewhere or at least consider other countries. Because my goal is not to make everyone relocate to Bulgaria. My goal during consultations is to find the solution that works best for my client. We definitely don't regret relocating here, and Bulgaria actually ticks a lot of our boxes with apartments, with ease of travel in Europe, low tax rate, and how easy it was to set it all up. And we did a lot of traveling during this year, and every single time on our last days of holiday, we were already picturing ourselves sleeping in our own bedroom again and going for evening walks in our regular location, in our regular parks. And even when we had a vacation in Japan or in Thailand, or we went to Greece, we still were happy to return. It doesn't mean that this is some sort of paradise here, but it means that life here is really comfortable for us, and it gives us that routine that we were searching for. If you're still at the stage where you cannot decide which location will be right for you, I offer one-on-one calls where I share with you my own experience in many countries in Asia and Europe, and together we figure out if one of those countries will work for you. In part 1 of Pros and Cons, I shared what's it actually like to settle in Bulgaria, the difficulties with residency, how much you are realistically spending on the living costs, and where you are actually saving money.